facilitator / moderator for this discussion. I want to thank you all for coming out. Before we begin the discussion, I want you to know that this is free-flowing. I will give some initial information about how we brought this forum in existence. I'm going to give you some ground rules and set the stage for the discussion, and then I'm going to sit down, shut up, and let you all do what you do. Once again, I want to thank the Black Student Union for hosting this event. They were the ones who came up with the idea, and I helped them craft what we wanted to do today. I want to thank members of our law enforcement for graciously coming out today and fielding your questions or comments about partnerships. I do want to very quickly go over some ground rules. Before I do that, let me tell you why this is important to the Black Student Union. Because a lot of our organizations on campus really have a challenge of getting students engaged and being a part of the organization. So what we did was, I suggested to them, why don't we have monthly forums that talk about issues that are important to the Black community, so that we can get people, whether you want to be a part of BSU or not, to have a discussion about topics that are important to that particular cultural group. And so the first one is today, and the first topic is about the relationship between law enforcement and the community. Okay, so that gives you a perspective of how we got started. And I want to very quickly, if you could look at the screen, I'm going to go over some additional information, just bear with me. Number one, I am a facilitator for Food for Thought, and it's a community organization where we discuss how to have courageous conversation and dialogues. They have a list of ground rules, which you should have a copy of, and I just want, for the sake of discussion, that you really try to adhere to these ground rules. Number one, listen and treat each other with respect. Okay, I understand that some people, this is a very emotional discussion, but I think that there are ways that we can articulate how we feel, but do it in a respectful manner. Each person gets a chance to talk. I know that some of you are not verbal, or some of you want to remain anonymous. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, we have sheets of paper where you can write down your question if you don't feel confident or comfortable expressing what you want to say verbally. But everybody should get a chance to talk. Everybody should feel like they have a chance to voice their opinion on a particular topic that we'll be discussing today. One person speaks at a time. Please do not cut people off. When someone is talking, we should be listening to what they have to say. Okay? Speak for yourself, not for others. So speak in first person, not third person. So I don't want to know what the Black community thinks. I don't want to know what law enforcement thinks. I want to know what you think about the issue. Own what you say. If someone says something and it bothers you, then you can feel free to say, you said that and that really bothered me. And then we'll debrief it and talk about why was that an issue for you. It's okay to disagree, but show respect for one another. And I'm going to go back to this one in a second about what it means to understand and agree. Help me keep things on track. We can make this a really fulfilling and enriching experience, or it could be really challenging. I play off of your energy. So I want you to be open, and I want you to be free to discuss things. But as far as keeping order, I'm going to need your help with that. And then finally, be mindful of what is said in the room. Understand that some of these things are maybe sensitive. If you don't want that information shared, you probably shouldn't talk about it. But if they talk about it, be respectful that some people may share some things that may be deeply personal to them, and just be respectful of that. Okay? Now, a couple of other things. Intergroup dialogue. Let me tell you the difference between intergroup dialogue, celebration, and activism. Not the same thing. Okay? So, celebration is when you're coming here to celebrate your position, cultural identity, or something like that. And activism is when you're fighting against power and privilege. Let me tell you what celebration is. Y'all know what's happening tomorrow in Colorado Springs? There's this big event happening tomorrow in Colorado Springs. Do you know what it is? Oh my goodness, no one knows what's gonna happen 3 miles from this location. President Trump. Now, inside the stadium, they are not doing intergroup dialogue. It's all about celebrating Donald Trump, Republican, and conservatives. That's celebration. Activism, all the protesters are going to be outside protesting the president. That's activism. That's not intergroup dialogue. Intergroup dialogue is when you're getting people together and they're going to have different perspectives and we're trying to understand so that we can grow by understanding each other's perspectives. That's intergroup dialogue. So I want you all to know the difference. I'm not saying celebration is not important. I'm not saying activism is not important. I'm saying understand that's not intergroup dialogue. Okay? Courageous conversation. I love this quote by Ishad Maji. She is the founder of the Moral Courage Project. And she says, and I quote, "My role as an educator is not to make you feel safe, it is to make you feel safe in your discomfort." In a courageous conversation, things are going to be said that are going to challenge your way of thinking. Okay? So you're going to say something that really is going to make you feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. This is not oftentimes a love fest. And the funny thing about it is, when you do courageous conversations, people are hesitant to do it, but yet we do it all the time. How many people here have children? How many people here are the child of a parent at some point in your life? Okay, so you mean to tell me when your parents never had a courageous conversation about something you were doing? Where they had to sit down and say, hey, look, this is totally unacceptable, or I don't like what you're doing, and I know you're not gonna like me saying this, but I'm gonna say it to you anyway. That's a courageous conversation. We do it all the time. Hey, my wife had courageous conversations with me quite regularly. So I want y'all to understand, there may be some things, some questions in here that may make you feel uncomfortable. That's okay. That's why we're here, so that we can get a better understanding. There's a difference between understanding and agreeing. So what we're trying to do is get you, at the very least, to understand a perspective that's different than yours. You may agree, you may not agree, but at least you understand. So I was teasing Tiara earlier today. So she is unapologetically a socialist. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay. So I understand why she embraces socialism. I don't necessarily agree with everything she says, but I understand it. Now, I'm not here to debate socialism. That's not the purpose of this one. I'm just saying that you don't always have to agree with someone, and you want to try to understand where they're coming from. Maybe you will agree, maybe you won't. Maybe the agreement won't happen until many weeks, months, or even years afterwards. But at least you got a better understanding of a different point of view than yours. So the first thing we want to do is to understand. This is a principle in Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. And his habit number 5 is to seek first to understand, then be understood. So you'll have your chance to express your opinion. We're just asking that you listen to what someone is saying, especially if it's contrary to what you believe. And the last thing is, at some point, we got to figure out, what do we want to do? People ask me this all the time. They tell me, Keith, I want you to hold a forum with law enforcement, and I was like, okay, so what are we going to do with this? So we're about to spend just inside of 2 hours having a discussion. What are we going to do with this information? Because everybody in here has a thought, agenda, a plan, or what have you. I know mine is to get you in the room to have courageous conversation and intergroup dialogue so we can bring better understanding. My role is an educator and facilitator. So I don't have a position today. I have a position, But today, that's not the role that I play. My job is to just keep the things moving, making sure everybody's voice is heard and it's articulated in a way that people can understand. But at some point, we got to decide, what is it that you want from this experience? What are we going to do with this information that we want to share today? Okay? And I want y'all to think about that, because at some point, we got to come to some resolution of how are we going to resolve, to change, to better understand, to transform what it is that we're trying to do. Okay? So with that, that is my little spiel. So now I'm in facilitator mode. It is now open for discussion. And we can start with anybody. I'm not going to pick on law enforcement. It doesn't have to start with you. If somebody has a question, what you do is state your name, your relationship to the college or the community, and then make your comment or your question. And if everybody gets all shy on me and I hear crickets, we have some questions all ready to go. So, anybody can start. All right. Please state your name and your affiliation. And
all right, so I'm Jason Newman. Clearly, as you can see, I'm a police officer, unless I stole this uniform, but I did not. I've been a cop for 16 years. I wanted to start out by introducing myself, because I think it's important to know who is representing the police department up here, right? I've been a police officer for 16 years. I was a cop in Portland, Oregon before I came here. Currently, I'm a sergeant over the community relations unit. I just took over that role. So part of community relations is doing this, right? Engaging in dialogue, having conversations. One of the things I came in this position, one of the things I'm starting to change is that we're not just going out to do events. You know, you always see cops handing out stickers. We're gonna still do that. Stickers are great, kids love stickers. But I want every single cop in my department to sit down and feel uncomfortable. Because when you feel uncomfortable and you get these conversations happening, we start to learn, right? We start to grow as people. So this is why we're here today. So I know it's kind of intimidating to ask these questions. If you have the question, ask it. You're never gonna offend me. However, I just wanna make sure we have dialogue, right? One of the things that we're doing in Colorado Springs PD and some of my cops is, and maybe in the community too, 2020, we need to get back to basics. We need to get back to learning and knowing each other. I grew up in the Midwest, in Michigan. I'm in Wisconsin. I ran track and field, so I was always in very diverse communities. And one of the things that we just knew each other, right? My mom could just leave me anywhere, and she knew I would be safe because the other family members would be looking at me, or other community members. We don't do that anymore in the community, right? We look out our mini blinds, and we don't know our neighbors, but we need to get to know each other. I'm here to keep you safe. I would tell you, I would give my life for every single one of you guys in this room. My wife knows that, my child knows that, my parents know that. It's a hard decision, but it's one that I'm okay with. So ask me the different questions. We are not perfect in the police department. We are by far perfect. We make mistakes. But I want to make sure that we're going to change and grow. So I didn't really have a question, I just had a comment, basically, just introduce myself. This is who I am, this is what I want. And I want you to see beyond my uniform, right? So when I see you out in the community, I see beyond your uniform. Sometimes we can take off our uniforms, sometimes we can't take off some of our uniforms, right? Is that a fair statement? So I wanted to make sure when we're interacting with you guys in the community, we're not seeing just the exterior, we're seeing who you are, we're seeing the person, and I want you to see that in my cops too. And so that's kind of where I stand. So hopefully maybe one of you guys have a question now, or I can let my other panel people.
So
yes.
Let's have each one of you guys introduce.
Started a trend.
I like it.
First time.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Detective Deidre Worley. I have been with the Colorado Springs Police Department for the last 20 years. In that time, I have been on patrol all over town. I have worked at the training academy. I have worked as a recruiting officer for the police department. I have been a school resource officer, so I've been in the high schools and middle schools, if I look familiar. Thank you. I currently work in investigations and in financial crimes. I've been here in Colorado Springs for probably about the last 26 years. I come from San Francisco. When I was in college back in California, I worked in a police department there, And I came here and I thought, this is a great community, I'm gonna stay here in this community. And working in law enforcement was what I chose to do. I chose to do that because I care about the community that I live in, I care about my family, I care about all of you and your safety, and making this community a quality place to live. It continues to grow since I've gotten here, since I've arrived, and I know things are continuing to change. And by being here in this circle with you, I think that I hope to go away and have a better understanding of what are the concerns of our community members at all age levels, and see how I can apply that to the position I'm in now, to whatever level of influence I have at the police department, and the rest of my career. So I'm hoping you folks will help me with that. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deputy Laura Robley, and I work for the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. I've been a deputy for about 10 years. Prior to that, I lived in California as well. So yeah, I didn't know we shared that. I come from a very small town called Sonora in Tuolumne County, and I always make the challenge that if anybody can spell Tuolumne without looking it up, I'll give you $20. So, anyways, law enforcement has been a passion ever since I was young. I've always wanted to help the community, and I've always wanted to be there for my community. So this is the way that I chose to do it. Like I said, I come from a really, really small town. There wasn't a lot of opportunity. There wasn't a lot of things going on. So I had the propensity to definitely go the different direction and get in trouble. But I was lucky enough to have some really great mentors, and I was taken in by the police department out there, and I was a police explorer, and just eventually got my college degree, and then moved out here about 12 years ago. So I absolutely love this job, and kind of like the sergeant said here, that our goal is to not just hand out stickers. We want to be a member of our community, not just by wearing the uniform, but being in our community and living in our community and making it better.
Hi, my name is Fabiola Jaques. I'm not from Colorado either, but I'm not from California. I know that's like, because everybody's coming from California. I am from El Paso, Texas. I'm a first generation US citizen, and my parents immigrated from Mexico, and I'm the youngest of 10 kids, and I have a very unique, different kind of background because I came to Colorado Springs to go to Colorado College, but I didn't come with Colorado College money. And part of the reason I tell you that is I don't want you to think you're ever stuck. You might be different. You might come from a different background. You might know a different culture. It doesn't mean you can't go somewhere completely different, not knowing anybody, and make a life for yourself and become a part of that community. I am family oriented, so I came to Colorado Springs about 20 years ago. I fell in love with the community, and when you fall in love, you make sacrifices, right? So I still have my family in El Paso, but I created an extended family here, and I created that extended family throughout the community. I love being a police officer, not just being a police officer anywhere. I love being a police officer here in Colorado Springs, and I love being a police officer for Colorado Springs Police Department. I don't want to belong anywhere else. And part of why I'm here today is to explain to you why I love where I am and why I'm proud to be a police officer. And Laura Robley and I, the deputy, and I, we both work community relations, and part of what we get to do is brag about our departments, talk about our role and our function and what we do for the community. We get to tell you about the caliber of people that we work with. And so that's part of what I want to do. I want to understand your perspective, and I want to share with you who I work with so you can know why we serve you and who is serving you and why we're so proud to serve you.
Awesome. So it looks like we have the first question. You guys can keep that one up here.
Oh, you want to?
Yeah.
Well, I guess we already did.
So actually, I don't want to make the assumption that everybody understands why we're actually here.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
you know who DeVon is, or what Pikes Peak Community College has already done, or what conversations have taken place. Because we're saying we're from here, but some people weren't where we were. And so if somebody could just kind of put that in context, maybe it's you, Keith, or someone just to kind of give a quick overview so that they understand how to frame their questions.
So we had a forum in September dealing with encounters with law enforcement, and we had some discussion on what to do and what are your rights and responsibilities. In addition to that, we've had community organizers come in and give their perspective on what happened specifically in relation to DeVon Bailey. And so there are a lot of conversations that are had across the campus that I'm not directly responsible for. But what they asked was they wanted a follow-up conversation where they could really ask the type of questions that they wanted to ask of law enforcement. And so they said, Keith, bring some law enforcement in here so we can ask some questions. So I was like, sure. So I knew Fabiola from the Latino Community Luncheon, and I reached out to her, and she was gracious enough to come, and she brought some colleagues here to have that conversation. And so the goal is to ask the questions that you want to ask of the police or law enforcement, and so that we can have a better understanding about policing, with the goal of learning about how can we prevent another DeVon Bailey incident from happening.
Do we have a show of hands of how many people know what happened?
Well, it'd probably be a good idea for somebody to tell the basic facts that we know.
Okay.
Just the basic.
Okay, I'm as best as I know it. Okay, so on August 3rd, there was a call into 911 that a person was allegedly being robbed, and they said it was two African American males, and they apparently had a weapon. And the police came and they approached DeVon Bailey and his cousin, I believe. Please help me out if I get this wrong. Okay, all right. So they were doing what's called a Terry stop, which is reasonable suspicion. And when they do it, they can search for weapons. So they told him, we're going to search for weapons to make sure you don't have a weapon on you, even though they probably got that through the dispatch that allegedly he did. And then DeVon ran, and the police told him to stop, and then they shot him as he was running away. Okay.
Several
and then,
times.
okay, thank you. And then they checked him, and they found a weapon on him. And then from there was this discussion about, was the use of deadly force warranted?
And he was killed.
Yeah, he was killed in the altercation. Okay. And so they did an investigation at first through the police department, and we can talk about how you do investigations when there's a police-involved shooting, and I think I'll leave that to law enforcement. But then some people objected to that because they wanted an independent review board to do the investigation. So what they did was they gave the information to the prosecuting attorney. The prosecuting attorney got a grand jury to find out if there was enough evidence to charge the police officer with a crime, and they determined that there was not a crime, that the use of deadly force was warranted, and then he wasn't charged with it. And then there's a whole other context that I think I would really feel comfortable if we just have that be a part of the conversation, because I'm sure there's some things that law enforcement would like to add, and I'm sure there's some things for people in the community that would like to add as well. So is that cool?
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
Keith.
then, again, if I did that if I didn't do that justice, feel free, because I'm trying to be a facilitator, so I'm trying to back my way out of this and just keep the conversation moving. So with that, are there any questions, comments? Because here in Crickets, we do have a list of questions, but I want to give people an opportunity to speak.
My name is Gregory Herring. I'm a student of High Street Community College for dental hygienist. I'm a go to High Street Community College for dental hygienist. I've been arrested about 5 times. All the times I've been arrested, pretty much for assaulting a police officer. I've never been shot at because I always disarmed the officer or whatever. But I'm just asking, like, when you guys do tell a person to stop or freeze, why you have to use deadly force? Why you can't just shoot for the leg, the thigh or whatever?
Yeah, I can take that question. Yeah, it's a good question. We get that question a lot. I got that question growing up. I ran track in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, not the safest city in the world, unfortunately. So we saw that a lot. I always had the question too until I became in law enforcement. So one of the things is if you ever handled a gun or shot a gun, when adrenaline's rushing, you're not very accurate trying to shoot a leg, trying to shoot at. And so what we train for is the center mass. So that's the part of your body right here. And so one of the things is I've actually, if you've seen shootings, you can actually be 5 feet from each other and people shooting at each other and they miss. You're like, how does that happen? It's because you act. And so one of the things that we are responsible for, and we train every single officer, if you pull that trigger, you're responsible for that bullet. If that bullet does not hit that person and that you have legal justification, and it goes through a neighbor's house or something like that, and you hit an innocent person, you're responsible for that, and that's a target on all of us in law enforcement. So it's always a question. People are like, why don't they just shoot the leg? If it was that easy, we would do that. Or if there was another option, we would do that. Deadly force. Most people think it happens a lot. It seems like it right now in society, but 90% of our cops will never fire their weapon on patrol. That's Colorado Springs. So there's a high percentage of us that will never even get in a shooting in our profession. And that's pretty wide statistically when you look at departments across the country, but we won't get involved in those situations. It seems like it does, right? Every day you hear a shooting, it seems like, oh my gosh, every day. And we have millions of stops a day and they don't end up in shooting. So it is a hard question to answer. But we want to train because it's hard to. There's not even a sniper shooter in the world that's going to be running and be able to be physical. That's going to be able to exactly hit somebody in the leg and stuff. And we're responsible for every bullet. So we do take a lot of care and concern in thinking about how we're going to discharge our weapon. That's why, speaking back when he was saying the police department did an investigation, we actually did not do an investigation. Colorado is a very unique state, and I think it's a good thing. We do not investigate ourselves. We are not allowed to. Some agencies used to have their own homicide detectives come out and investigate a shooting. We do not do that. We actually give our investigation over. We do not have any say in the investigation. It's investigated by an outside agency. So a lot of people are under the perception that we are investigating ourselves. That's not the case. We will investigate ourselves if an officer made a policy violation. We will still look at that and say, hey, this was outside of our scope. But independent, in this case, El Paso County is going to be doing any of our deadly force investigations. We won't even have a say in it. So we came and say who they're going to interview, what they're going to talk about. We allow them to do it, and we don't even get to see what they send to the DA. We don't even get to see what they send to the grand jury because we want to keep ourselves out of it. So I think that was a step in the right direction for Colorado. A lot of agencies across the country, that's not what happens, and we know that, right? They investigate themselves, and that doesn't show that you're impartial. It doesn't show transparency. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I wanted to address that about doing the police investigation. That's something that we don't do actually anymore. And we did that in the past. And I think it's right that we don't investigate ourselves anymore. I think it's important that somebody else looks at the investigation. And we actually, in this last case, we handed all the information over to the FBI too, so they can look at it and evaluate it. So we're not, because if something's going wrong in our department, shame on us if we're not handling it right. So we want outsiders to see that, and that's why I think it's important that we're not doing our own deadly force investigations.
Thank you. So I have two questions actually to address what you just said. How do you measure your policy on deadly force? Well, what is your policy on deadly force? Because I know that you guys want to stop somebody who might be a harm potentially to other people, but when DeVon Bailey was running away, there were families outside in a park actually where children were playing and the bullets went off. So what exactly is your policy on deadly force versus running after somebody or using a taser? And then my second question is, who does the investigation for you guys? Who is that?
So the second question I answer first. In the case, we set up the deadly force investigation teams. And so if we get involved in a shooting, El Paso County is going to do the investigation for us. And vice versa, if they get involved in a shooting, we will do it, and we will not allow them. I mean, they get to be out there, but they do not get to dictate how we investigate them. And vice versa, we do not dictate how they investigate us. So it's really important that we don't have any say or input in that. So it does it seems like it kind of muddies the water when we used to investigate ourselves, but now that's why we try to make it clear. That's a state law. That's what we actually, the citizens, the community asked for, and so that's why it's in practice now. Do you want to, or what do you guys want to handle the use of force and how we address the use of force? Since I'm not answering all the questions.
So I'm going to talk to you based on patrol officer. I am a patrol officer. I'm the first
line patrol officer. What that means is I'm not a sergeant, I'm not a lieutenant, I'm not command staff. I am just a patrol officer, regular officer out on the street. And I think this is a great question, and it's a very, very difficult question to answer, because part of our roles are that I'm going to talk to you about my experience and what I know. For me to answer that question for the officers involved that day in the incident would be unfair, because I do not know what they're seeing. I do not know the information that they have at the time. I do not know what's going on. I am not there. I can tell you that we do have a way of training where there are different levels of use of force. And again, I'm not trying to avoid a question. I'm trying to make it simple where I'm not talking to you in policy and procedure kind of jargon, because that wouldn't be fair either, right? So I'm trying to simplify it because I'm kind of a little bit more simple that way. The most unpopular answer in law enforcement when we talk to people about why we do things is it depends. And it depends on the totality of circumstances. You can go to 5 disturbance calls, and each call will end up probably with a different result depending on what the circumstances and the factors are in that call. So we could start off anywhere from us just showing up in our patrol car and our uniform. That's kind of a use of force because of the way we stand out, right? If you see somebody in a uniform, you respond to them a little different. It could be anything from my taser, my extended baton, anything all the way up to lethal force. There is nothing that says that I have to start off all the way down to verbal commands, and then I have to work my way up the levels. I could go in and start fighting with somebody right away. It just kind of depends. So it's a great question. I'm not quite sure. We have months of training in the academy to talk about use of force, and that's a very difficult question to answer in a limited amount of time. Maybe if you could be a little bit more specific about something, I could answer it, but I don't know how to tell you all about our use of force, because we have a lot of hours we spend training it, and I don't want to miss something and not touch on something.
Your policy on deadly force, specifically guns. So in what situations were you guys taught in that training process, was it appropriate to pull out a gun and shoot somebody?
You mean in that training process? Or-
And just in CSPD's overall training process, when you guys bring new police officers into the force, how do you guys train them on deadly force? Is it just completely up to their discretion whether or not they can use it?
So the Colorado Springs Police Department and police departments all over, we go off of the state statutes, the state laws that are out there. The state of Colorado has a law of when a police officer can use deadly force. And forgive me because I haven't read it exactly in a long time. The statute itself says that a police officer in the state of Colorado can use deadly force when they have reasonable suspicion to believe that an individual has committed a crime using deadly force or there's an imminent threat of deadly force. So in situations where we are aware that there is possibly a gun involved, we go into that situation thinking that there is an imminent possibility that somebody can be hurt. That imminence could be an immediate interaction between us. Imminence could be somebody leaving with a deadly weapon when we already know that there's a weapon possibly involved in the situation. So when we get calls from the community will tell us why they're calling. They call and they say, this person threatened me with a weapon, a gun. This person threatened me with a knife. This person punched me in the face. All of those different situations evoke a different response from me as a responding patrol officer. If I go in and I'm thinking, okay, this is a fist fight, then the great thing about the job is they do provide us with different levels of force that we can use. It's a situational force model. That situational force model puts me right at the center and says that I get to make the decision of what level of force I'm going to use based on the information that I have. The bits and pieces of that model that I have to choose from, standing right in the middle, the moment that I show up in my uniform and show my badge, that we consider I don't want to necessarily say it's a use of force, but it is my presence. My presence here standing in front from you means that I'm a police officer, we're engaged, and we need to have a conversation. Here's my presence. I have options of verbal communication, right? So now I'm going to say, stop, don't do that, come here, let's talk, listen. Again, it all depends on what that situation is that occurs. That depends on what I'm faced with. If the individual goes, oh, okay, yeah, let's have a conversation, then great. We are now equally using the same amount of force. We're having a conversation. So I've got my presence, I've got verbals, I've got escort holds, right? An escort hold, I say, you know what, you've got to come with me. So I put my hands on you and we walk away. I put my hands on you and you're cooperative and you agree, great. Doesn't always go that easy. Sometimes they don't want to walk away with me. That's based on what happens outside of me. I'm still looking at the situation. They pull away, they say no, we fight. Then my situational force model gives me another step up. That next step up might be a control hold, which is, I don't know, a wrist lock, an arm bar, an escort hold, something like that. Control holds. An individual might decide that they want to fight me. They might want to punch at me, kick at me. Okay, I don't have to sit there and wait for the individual to make that decision to punch at me or kick at me. I can defend myself just like anybody else here, right? You know, the best defense is not to be there, right? So if somebody's going to punch at me or I think that we're going to fight, then I need to step up just a little bit more so that I can get in control of the situation. So there's punching and kicking. Then you look at the belt that the officers are wearing. You'll see that they have pepper spray. You see that they have handcuffs for control. You see that they have tasers. Another part of that, another aspect too, is that body camera that we wear, right? That body camera is going to help us observe the situation and explain it to people. It has not been my goal, let me put it that way. It's not my goal as a police officer to show up at work and go, today's the day that I'm going to shoot somebody. But I'm here to defend you and myself. And if there's an imminent threat, if there's a possibility that something can happen that involves the use of a deadly force, knives, guns, then I need to use equal or greater force so that I can stay in control of that situation.
So just from the sheriff's office side, sorry, I didn't finish.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So from the sheriff's office side, we do have a deadly force policy, and all of our policies are based on, like she said, state law and federal law. So there has been cases that have gone to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court justices have issued what rules of engagement we have based on different circumstances. So a lot of the times, as she was explaining, we have all these different levels of force. Basically, the way we have to go into a situation, we have to go off of the information that we have. And that's going to be information that we receive from our dispatch. And then once we get on scene, the direct communication with that person. I believe they say like over 80% of communication is nonverbal between people. So there's a lot of training that we receive about that nonverbal communication. on whether somebody is looking behind us because they're trying to see if we have other officers nearby to witness what they're going to do. If they're looking behind them, there's an avenue for them to escape. If somebody is gonna assault you, a lot of times they're gonna rub their hands on their palms to dry off their hands because they're sweaty and they're nervous. There's a lot of different things that we pick up on, and we're trained to pick up on so that we can again raise that level of force to deter that person from continuing up higher on that scale.
I'm going to get your question next, but I just want to bring this back to investigation. So you say El Paso County investigates CSPD and vice versa. Because in the media, and again, I'm just bringing this up for conversation, a lot of people really wanted an independent review board or independent investigative body to investigate deadly force because you all work so closely together. Can someone speak to that? Because again, I want to make sure all these issues are out, and that was one that was brought up in my understanding of the case with DeVon Bailey. But it's bigger than DeVon Bailey. It's with any police-involved shooting, where the sentiment in the community is that even though you're getting another agency, you're still all law enforcement. So can we debrief that a second and just
Just trying to figure out where you want to. I mean, because that's just practice right now.
Well, the governor had, yeah.
go
No, go ahead.
Yeah, let me get hers because I'll
question. The thing I was thinking about is how do you remain impartial with no bias if you constantly work with them and you're investigating them?
Okay, we need a mic. Sorry about that. Kind of gave it away. There you go.
So we work in collaboration. The Sheriff's Office and Colorado Springs Police Department, we work in collaboration, but we are two separate entities and we have different functions and roles. And I think what you want to know about is when there's a deadly force shooting, right? Is that what you want to know if we work closely together? I'm sorry? And I'm not sure I'm answering this right because I think you're talking about the investigation. We work together in collaboration closely, but we also have different functions and roles. Colorado Springs Police Department has jurisdiction in the city, and we maintain law and order in the city. Sheriff's Office also does unincorporated county, but they're also in charge of detentions and like civil. So we do work together, but we do different things. When it comes to major investigations, that's more of a specialized unit, and they do work in collaboration, but there's still different entities working in different areas and conducting investigations with different teams. And I don't think I'm answering your question. I think you want to know a bigger level, right?
Just from my perspective, I get where you're coming from with that because we do work so closely together, but really we don't. We are completely different agencies. We do the same job, but when it comes to a criminal investigation, that is our task at hand, to investigate the criminal investigation related to an employee. And I would have to say that it has happened frequently where an employee maybe off duty has been involved in something and we're forced to investigate that. And as a police officer, we all hold each other to a higher standard because we know the rules, we know the laws, and we hold ourselves to a higher standard. So if there is even like the suspected that a criminal allegation has occurred, we want to make sure that we investigate that 100%. Especially me, I wouldn't want somebody to say, oh, well, that person was a police officer, therefore you're not holding them accountable. Because from my perspective, I hold everybody that wears a badge to a higher standard and they need to be held accountable.
Right, and I want to echo what you just said, but it's hard, right? It's hard to have that faith. I'm not gonna say I 100% believe that when I got law enforcement. I had doubts too myself, like really you can investigate this? It is that. So one of the things when like a deadly force investigation or when someone loses a life, the loss of a life, let's remember this, folks. Any life lost is tragic. No matter if they're a felon, no matter if they're that's a life. It's someone's brother, it's someone's sister, it's someone's family member. So I think that's important to understand that when we as cops get into this business, when we get into this, when like a life is lost, we look at that life. Our job is to do justice for that family. If our cop or another cop is in the wrong, we want to hold them accountable. If the citizen's in the wrong, we want to hold them accountable because we want to give closure to that family. Because when we know, right? Everybody's who's lost somebody in their family in here. That loss of life. Who's lost somebody that you don't have answers to? The hands, not as many hands go up, but those hands that are going up, it's hard, right? I can see head shaking. So if it's when we're investigating, we're looking at it from the victim. We're going to find the facts. We're going to gather the facts, and we're going to keep that out. And it's really hard to believe that from the outside. But what I want you to do is I want you to come and learn about our department. One of the ways you can do that is we involve you guys. We have two academies every year. We used to call it the Citizens Academy. We've changed that wording because it's called the Community Academy. We do one for Spanish speakers and one for just general. And it actually goes through the investigations. It shows you how we do that. If I have any of my cops on duty that say, hey, this guy was disrespectful to me, we open an investigation immediately on that cop. Because if he's disrespectful or she's disrespectful, not treating you properly, I do not want that person working with me or protecting you. Does that make sense? So we do hold people to very high standard. And if somebody's doing wrong, or if somebody was wrong in their decision making, or did something unlawful, I don't want them to be part of law enforcement because it makes my job harder every time I go back and try to go to the community and say, trust me. Well, I can't trust you. And I get why you can't. But that's kind of, it's hard to